For joining us tonight for an artist lecture by Jana Harper. We're really honored to have her here visiting from Vanderbilt University. And Jana is here as part one of our multi-part event series that is happening with Uncovered Spaces, an exhibition of women artists and LGBTQIA+ artists at the IMAS that's opening March 24th. 2020, next month, and to celebrate the beginning of the events and to connect with you students and faculty and our community, Jana Harper has flown down to visit y'all, tell you about her practice, hear your ideas, hear more about you, and connect with you during her stay. And the information for Uncovered Spaces, which has been about 2 years in the planning. Rahele Filsufi, our former colleague who is now at Vanderbilt, was with me from the genesis of this project. And now that Rahele is a member of the Vanderbilt family, we're really excited because this has become a collaboration between UTRGV and Vanderbilt now. And the Vanderbilt Center for Latin American, Caribbean, and Latinx Studies is collaborating with the UTRGV Center for Latin American Arts. And it's just generated this new national kind of web of relationships and artists coming together. So we're really excited. We're gonna have 13 artists at the exhibition Uncovered Spaces at the IMAS, and one of the artists is Jana Harper. And Jana is an associate professor at Vanderbilt University currently. She received her MFA at Arizona State. And she's just an incredible artist and educator. And yes, so we're just really honored that she's here to share her ideas and connect with y'all. So one of the goals of this week that she's visiting is to find out if any students, we hope that you all are interested in participating in a performance piece. She's going to talk more about that, but there are two performance pieces. One will be presented digitally at the opening in the gallery at Uncovered Spaces, and the other one will be performed at the opening night of Uncovered Spaces, and the work will be displayed at the IMAS after the opening weekend. So I'm really excited to learn more about it myself. As an art historian, Jana has really helped me pause, think about where I am in this world, who I am, where our places are, who we are, and about our practice and sustainability and ancestry. So she's just an inspiring person, and I'm honored to be able to bring her to visit with y'all tonight and also be here in Brownsville tomorrow. And then we'll be back in Edinburgh tomorrow night to visit a few graduate seminars. So we'll be around circulating. Please just stop us, help us connect with you in whatever way is best. And we also have a sign-up sheet outside. It looks like this. This is an itinerary I printed up for everyone with all the events scheduled for Uncovered Spaces. You can see there's a lot of things happening. We're having another lecture Tuesday, March 8th for ceramics with Professor Cooper and Rahele Filsufi from Vanderbilt, and another artist in the show, Lauren Sandler from Temple University in Philadelphia. So we have a lot of events scheduled, and 6 of the 12 artists will be in person at the opening of the IMAS on March 24th. And there's also a sign-up sheet that we'll talk about after Jana's lecture for any students interested in participating in the performance pieces. So just put your name and email and we'll reach out to you and we can make a beautiful plan. So thank you all so much for coming today, and without further ado, I'd like to introduce and thank Jana Harper for coming.
Wow, full room. I want to get my mask. Hi, it's me. Hi, Zoom people. Thanks for joining us. I'm so happy to be here, and thank you all for coming tonight. It's really an honor to be here, and it's really an invitation. I want to work with you. So I'm here to kind of tell you a little bit about my practice leading up to this body of work and these two projects that I'm working on for the IMAS show, and we'll kind of talk about that at the end. But thank you to the Center for Latin American Arts, and thank you to the College of Fine Arts, and to Dr. McAllen and your staff, and also to my beloved colleague, Rahula Filsufi, without whom I wouldn't be here to visit with you. So if you're a fan of Rahula's, I know she's on right now, like, let's give her a say. Hi, Rahula! Oh, yeah, okay, awesome. So I want to sort of talk about two different aspects of my practice, and it's a little bit of a before COVID and after COVID, which I think everyone can maybe relate to. I am an interdisciplinary artist. My degree from Arizona State is actually in printmaking and letterpress. And so I ran a letterpress studio for almost 15 years at Washington University in St. Louis before I went to Vanderbilt. And so I have a real passion for the printed word and for ideas about democracy and dissemination, and we make a lot of zines in the classes that I teach now because I just feel like, their accessibility is really important to me. But so is community, and I'll just say, my undergraduate degree is from the Evergreen State College, which like no one has heard of, which is okay, but it's a really tiny little kind of no grades alternative school. And one of the things that is sort of instilled in you as someone there is that we never stop learning, and that and I really think of myself as a lifelong learner, and I love being in the position of the student. I'm not comfortable with the position of the expert. I much more prefer the position of the student. And so I think I put myself in a lot of situations where I get to ask questions, and that's kind of foundational for my practice. And I'll just say, just this image that I'm starting with is really important because in addition to the fine artwork and the printing and the multimedia and et cetera, I'm also very interested in somatics, and so in the body, our understanding of the body. And I trained as a yoga teacher. I taught restorative yoga for many years, and one of the things that I became really interested in is how we physicalize our internal selves. So you guys come on in, there's room. There's actually some chairs right up here. Feel free to come right on in. And so one of the questions that I started to ask is, what are the burdens that we carry and how do we carry them? I think the fact that we carry burdens as human is like universal. And there's this kind of amazing guy named Robert Bly, who's a poet that maybe some of you have read. But one of the things that he talks about is that when you're born, and I'm really gonna butcher this, and I'm paraphrasing, so don't quote me, but you kind of have this bag that you carry. And as you age, like more and more stuff gets put into that bag until you're like kind of carrying all this crap behind you, right? We just accumulate it as humans. And so this sculpture, it kind of articulates that. It's these are pant legs. They're jeans that I got from the Goodwill that are sewn together and stuffed with buckwheat. They're super heavy. This whole piece weighs about 250 pounds. And so you'll see a little bit later, I'm going to show a performance where someone is actually performing with this. So the metaphor of weight is interesting to me, and how we physicalize it. So I have had the great opportunity to go into several communities and work with people on developing performances. And a couple of years ago, my colleague Magdalena Campos Pons, who is also in the Uncovered Spaces exhibition, was the curator for a portion of the Havana Biennial in her hometown of Matanzas in Cuba. And so I got to work with this incredible woman who, I don't know how to show her to you, except just the point is to work with this Lilium and her dance company, Danza Espiral. And so one of the first things I did was I asked them this question: what are the burdens that you carry? And you can see on the list that they're thinking about things large and small. They're thinking about like the global sort of political system that they find themselves in. They're thinking about things like their visa application to go to the States. They're thinking about food shortages. At the time that I was there was no oil to cook with. And then they're thinking about things like the health of their families. And, so I think the way that we think about these things that we carry around, they're large, they're small, every community has their particular concerns, and then there are other things that we share, our concern for our family, our concern for our livelihood, etc. So how did we turn this into a performance? These are ration bags. So these are the bags that arrive in Cuba with things like rice, like staple foods in them, and then they get rationed out and distributed to the community. Everyone gets a certain portion per week. And I decided that this was maybe a good metaphor for talking about these burdens. So we took that list, we wrote each of those words on the bags. Oops, sorry, is that me? And then we developed a performance around that work. And the bags got sewn with elastic so that we had straps and ways that we could connect them both to each other and to ourselves. And then we did a procession through the city with this incredible singer, Moksha Singing, who is at the head of that wheel. And this is the Seba Tree, which is a really sacred tree, which is sitting in the center of the town, right? And there's a whole story about this wheel that came from a sugar plantation, and of course there are a lot of sugar uprisings. And the way that this tree has grown over and embraced this symbol of this really monumental uprising was like the perfect place for us to begin this procession. So all the performers are wearing white. We start out each just with one of the objects, and then as we move through the city, we accumulate more and more and more of them. And you'll hear, I've collaborated with Moksha a couple of times, and you'll hear her voice in a clip I'm going to play for you later. So by the time we've moved through the entire city, we've basically gathered all of that stuff and piled it up and up and up into this sculpture that is taller than we are. And what happened is that we went into the Palace of Justice with all of those burdens, and the community, the people that were the friends and the relatives and the people that are interested in the arts and et cetera, came and basically joined us in doing a kind of a ceremony around that object as the closing ceremony for the exhibition. And it was a really beautiful and kind of life-changing experience for me to work there and with them. And then another kind of similar work, I asked this question, I would say over a period of like 4 years. So starting in about 2016, in about 2018, I got a grant from the National Endowment of the Arts to turn this work into a stage production. So I was working with a dance company or members of a dance company called New Dialect in Nashville, Tennessee, which is where I live. But the research was taken into the community. So the lists, the ideas, some like sort of general movement research, and also on the road. So this was a workshop I did with students at UC Berkeley in the Performance Studies program. Again, we generated a list. Each person chose one thing or one word that they were going to engage with. Because we were kind of doing it on the fly, we used chairs as our objects. I couldn't carry the sculptures that I was making, but we used the chairs, and then the students eventually piled all of the chairs up into this crazy, Paulo Freire kind of constellation, and then they took off their shoes and they threw their shoes at this thing, and it like fell to the ground. So it just had this incredible energy to it. So as we were preparing for this theater performance of this work, COVID happened, and we of course couldn't rehearse indoors. We couldn't have our performance indoors. We weren't allowed to gather like this at that moment, if you remember, in early 2020. And so we had, our funders were really generous, and so we pivoted to film. And that kind of became the way that we did it. But you know, we had the whole performance score worked out, and we had to readapt it with social distancing in mind. I don't know, do you remember this period when we like couldn't touch anybody that we didn't live with? And it was like all you wanted to do was hug your friend, but you couldn't like hug or touch anybody. And so we, in the performance, only people who lived together were allowed to touch each other. And all of the other scenes we adapted with distance in mind. And I'll just show you a quick clip. This is the trailer for the piece. The extended piece is about 30 minutes long, and I'm happy to share the URL with you if you want to see it. This is Moksha singing. So did you see that tiny woman pulling that long thing up the hill? Yeah, poor thing. It was really heavy. So I think, you know, after completing that piece that was like May of 2020, I was really confused about what to do with my practice, and I kind of went to a quieter, more internal, more research stage. If you guys, there's some seats up here if you want to come in and sit. Feel free to come on. Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about my family. My family is like 3/4 like settler, Scotch-Irish kind of people, and then 1/4 Métis, like mixed race, French and Native American. So, and that part of the family is from an island chain in northern Michigan. So this is actually my triple great-grandmother, Susan LeBach Paquin, who was from St. Ignace, Michigan, which is the first town you get to when you cross the Mighty Mac Bridge from the lower peninsula of Michigan to the upper peninsula. And our family is from this kind of whole island chain in here. But the way that we can sort of track that is through the Durant roll, which was a census that was taken at the late part of the 1800s and the early part of the 1900s to kind of determine what Indians were eligible to receive annuity payments from the government. So it's like an Indian census, essentially. And many generations of my family can be tracked to this island, which is called Mackinac Island, which is kind of famous in Michigan because the governor of the state has her summer residence on the island. It's a super touristed place. But one amazing thing is that it is predominantly taken care of by the state park system. So it's not, I mean, there's a lot of tourists and mansions, but there is still some preserved land there that you can engage with. I am enrolled in the Mackinac Band of Ottawa and Chippewa Indians, and our band is not federally recognized. And so that is a really interesting space to navigate, right? It's like state recognized, but not federally recognized. And I think, a lot of us can sort of understand what that, like, government negotiation from, nation to nation, it's precarious, right? But this is actually a court case where the tribe was petitioning for federal recognition in 2016 and were not able to receive it at that time. So it's now in this whole other kind of bureaucratic process. But what I became interested in was this idea of recognition. Like, what does that mean to recognize each other? What does it mean to recognize not just nation to nation or human to human or family to family or band to band, but also what does it mean to recognize the plant nations and the animal nations and the water, and what do those relationships and negotiations look like? So I started here, which seemed like a good place to start because this is like where all the names are cataloged. Our family name is Borsa, and you can see here there's like a bunch of different spellings of that name, which is maybe also something that you can relate to, right? It's like how a name gets changed over time based on who's writing it down or who's recording it. And so what I set out to do was to handwrite all of the names of the people that were from Mackinac Band, from these two lists. And there were about 500 at that time. So I handwrote them all, and then I cut up that list and I made them into beads. And those beads I strung onto a piece of string that is about 17 feet long. And they look like wampum, actually. They look like they're made of shell, even though they're made of paper. And this was all during, I guess, summer. Now I'm confused.
Summer 2020?
This was actually still in summer 2020. Yeah, okay. So I took the beads to Mackinac Island, and what you see here is like, the Tupperware container holding the beads so they don't get wet on the boat over to the island. And I had a bicycle because actually what's interesting about this island is there's no cars allowed. There's horse and buggies, and there's bicycles, and there's the foot, and that's it. And so somebody let me borrow their bicycle. I went over there, and I stayed for a couple of days, and I basically engaged in private performance, like these acts of performance that were really between me and the trees, or between me and the oldest rocks on the island. And what I was curious about, or what I was thinking about, is that those trees and rocks were there at the same time that those people were there. And I wondered if I said those names out loud, if they would recognize each other. I had no idea how my position as a human would understand that, or how I would how I would know if they recognized each other. But I just wanted to introduce the possibility or the potential for that recognition. So I took that string of beads, I hung it on all of these different locations around the island, and then I read the entire list of the 450 names, which took about 30 minutes at each location to read it. The first time, I'll just tell you a quick story, but the first time I read it was actually at this tree on the right, this white pine tree. And I got about halfway through the list, and I started to feel really sick, like I thought I was gonna throw up. And I actually couldn't even finish reading the names. And I went back to the place where I was staying, and I was like, okay, I'm just gonna like lie down and drink some water. And actually my mom called, and I was like telling her what happened, and I just burst into tears. And I had no idea that I was sort of holding so much expectation or so much tension, or I don't know what it was, just so much emotion around reading these names. But somehow hearing my mom's voice just helped that sort of fall out of my body. And then, interestingly, the tribal chairwoman called me, and she was like, how's it going? What are you doing? And I said, oh my God, the weirdest thing just happened. I was reading these names and I couldn't read anymore. And she said, do you remember what name you were on when you started to feel that way? And I said, I don't know what the name was, but I was in the G's. And she was like, yeah, of course you were. And then she told me this story about this family that was, that they had a rough kind of relationship with the island, and that their history on the island was something that had a lot of historical trauma associated with it. And so that was really interesting. But hearing her say that kind of helped me then move through that name the next many times that I read it. There were, I set up my video camera and it just was stationary, and then there I was reading these things. But sometimes, like this incredible cedar tree, can you imagine? It's like 300 years old, so it's been there for a long time, but it's right on the side of the road. So people were bicycling and riding past, and that just was captured in the video, and that sort of just became a part of it. Was like, I'm addressing what I perceive as the past, and it's in touch with the present, right? And so it wasn't bothersome that the tourists were coming by. It was like, yeah, that's what's happening now, that's okay. And then this is a really special rock. It's called Sugarloaf Rock in English. And there's a whole story, which I'll tell you another time, about this rock. But reading the names there was also a really special thing. But part of what happened when I was there also was that I connected with someone, I'll just go back to the Durant role. So someone from the Traverse Bay Band, who's a historian, who was helping me kind of to understand the history. And he said something to me that really stuck with me, which is like, Mackinac Island isn't just sacred for people who were named as Mackinac people. It was actually sacred to a whole lot of people. And so that sort of got me thinking about how we create memorials, or how naming becomes inclusive or disclusive. And so the next project I embarked on was to write all the names of all the tribal members that were on that Durant roll. And that became this piece. So there are 4 tribes that are named. For 3 of them, where the yellow and the red and the black are, I just wrote the names in ink over and over and over and over and over again. I just wrote all the names on one sheet of paper, which meant that page got totally saturated with color, and no longer were the individual names discernible. And then the final tribe I wrote with black on white so that you could read them. So that became the kind of, I guess it's a painting, but I don't think of myself as a painter, but I guess that's what it is. And that was in this exhibition called Blood, which is important, Memory and the Power of Naming, which was a kind of investigation for me just in how to visualize my own family ancestry, or how do you even conceive of a family tree, right? They're so complicated, and they have so many names so quickly, right? If it's like 2 and then 4 and then 8, every generation doubles, and that accumulates fast. And so I made this piece, which documents my mom's side of the family, and I just took one line, which is the diagonal. Those are all the Borsas. So just charting those Borsas back in place. And the horizontal line is where these 2 kind of key Métis families came together. And then you can see all the siblings on that horizontal line, and like what would happen if we filled in all the blanks with all the cousins and etc., right? But I just wanted to get a kind of axis of these. And the materials that I used for this piece were enriched white rice, which I felt like was a good metaphor for the settlers, and then wild rice that is gathered and processed by the Red River Band of Chippewa Indians in Minnesota. And So essentially what I'm doing here is like a blood quantum study, which might seem kind of disgusting, but on the one hand, but on the other hand, when you're white and have blue eyes and you tell someone that you are a member of an Indian tribe, they look at you like, right? Yeah, I bet you are. And there's like all these websites called Pretend Indian, and then you worry that you're gonna show up there. And so that question, like, how Indian are you? Like, is essentially someone asking you about your blood. And I was curious how to visualize that, and that's what happens here. Another way that I worked with the rice was just writing how the name Borsa changed over 7 generations. And I'll tell you, writing with rice is a pretty tedious business, but also really satisfying. We talked about this as a performance piece for the IMAS. Oh my gosh, thank you IMAS. I forgot to thank them. We had a really great visit there today. Incredible staff, and I'm really excited to work with them. But this was just too complicated. So what I want to do is tell you about these 2 pieces that I'm working on that I invite you, I ask you, please, to join me, and I would love for your participation. So we're working on 2 pieces. One is a video, and it's called I Am Them, They Are Me. And as you know, the show is really about celebrating women artists. That doesn't mean that men can't be involved. It just means that for this piece, we're celebrating our female ancestry. So we're celebrating our matrilineal line instead of our patrilineal, which is more normal, essentially. But we'll celebrate the women, right? And so what we're going to do, what Carlos is going to help us with, is setting up a camera right out here where you catch the shuttle, and actually drawing the names of our female ancestors with water onto the concrete. So what happens, and I'll just show you an example of this experiment, and what happens while I'm talking is that, and I don't know if any of you know the work of the Colombian artist Carlos Munoz, who makes these incredible portraits of people who have disappeared, and he paints them in water, and then they kind of evaporate. The heat of the pavement evaporates the drawing, and it's this incredible metaphor for memory. And so in this work, we're writing the names, and they evaporate kind of just as soon as we write them. And so we're thinking about how fleeting this life is, how quick it passes by, how our ancestors kind of, go past somewhat quickly. And this goes on for quite a while, but I just wanted you to have a sense of how that evaporation process worked. We spent some time today walking around the entire building and testing this on different walls and trying to figure out where would be a good space. And I think that front space right outside the front door is perfect. Not only because it is the ground that we walk on, so it's like foundational, and it sort of represents this place and this earth, and it is, really here. But also just because materially it absorbs the water in a really nice way. And so we're going to send around a sign-up sheet, and so if you're interested in participating in this work, I think that next week Carlos is going to have probably 3 different windows where the camera will be set up. So you can go home, have a conversation with your family, make a list of who your female ancestors are if you want to share their names, and then come back and write them in with water on the pavement. And then everyone's work will get edited together into a video that will be shown at the IMAS for the duration of the exhibition. And I'll just say, one thing I'm really interested in as a teacher is giving my students opportunities to participate in work, and also to kind of exhibit their work and to bulk up their resume. And so this is kind of a good way to participate in something and have a line that you can add to your resume. If you're thinking about applying for graduate school or whatever, it's nice to have some shows, and everyone will be named as participants in the work in the museum. So this is the first way that you can participate. Whoops, let me just go back. So essentially, this is kind of what it looks like once there's that density of names that are coming and going. Is that clear? Yeah, sure. So this is kind of like a low stakes way to participate. Come out, draw with the water, spend 10 minutes, no big deal. The second invitation is to participate in a live performance on opening night, which is, help me out here, Catherine, Thursday,
March 24th.
March 24th. The opening is from 5 to 7. And what I'm hoping is that we'll have a critical mass of people who want to participate in this aspect of the work. And what's happening here is also really simple. We have a piece of paper taped to the front of our body and to the back of our body. And I'll just show you what the back looks like. And the metaphor here is also thinking about our positionality between those that came before us and those that are coming after us. And that we're kind of in this, position in the middle. So in this work, we're using both hands to draw the names. On the front of my body, I'm writing the names of my children, my nieces and nephews, the cousins, like the kind of people that are alive, that are moving into the world, who are still kind of coming up, right? They're the ones that we perceive as being like, in front of us, so to speak. And then on the back of the body, we're writing the names of the people that came before us. And this is not about, this isn't gendered, this piece. This is really about just, all the ancestors that we can memorize. And the performance takes about 10 minutes, but it's pretty intense. It's kind of an intense, like you have to really go into a zone. And if you're interested in this, in participating in this performance, I would love it. We'll probably have one Zoom, I'll just give you what you're getting into. Probably one Zoom meeting where we really talk about the logistics of it. And then meeting at the museum like an hour before the show, putting the paper on, and then understanding where everyone's cued to stand. Because what's going to happen is the space will be filled with all of the people that are attending the opening, and we will be kind of in and among them, right? So if you're at the opening, I'm here doing my thing, and someone else is here doing their thing. It's not a performance in the sense of we are on one side of a stage and everyone is watching. It's more of an action where we're embedded in the activity of the opening itself. So I think we have a sign-up sheet that Catherine's going to pass around.
Yeah,
is it going back?
It's going around.
Oh, great. Okay. And if you want to put your name and your email address, and if you want to, you can say like one or the other or both, like whichever one you're interested in participating in. Maybe you'll get extra credit. I don't know, from your professors.